Hello, and welcome to the Innovator's Mindset, Creating a Better Tomorrow with AI. I'm Allison Ryder, Senior Project Editor at MIT Sloan Management Review, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. I'm really excited to speak with these three inspirational women. They are all leading extremely meaningful work in the artificial intelligence space around the world, frankly. Today's session is presented by MIT SMR and BCG, and it's powered by me, myself, and AI. So first, let me share a little bit of context on how we got here, and some immediate context on how we got here, and we're starting a little late, is because we were just dealing with some technical issues, which tends to happen around this time of Mercury retrograde. So here we are, we're all here and ready to chat with you today. Thank you for bearing with us. Just wanted to let you know that Me, Myself, and AI is a podcast. It spun out from some collaborative research that we've done between MIT SMR and BCG. We're in our 5th year of studying AI and business strategy, so that's a deliberate intersection of the technology with business strategy, organizational design, considerations when you're implementing AI in an organizational context. So be on the lookout for our new report. It's coming out this fall on November 2nd. We're really excited to share our findings with you there. For these studies, we interview executives and thought leaders, and we were having so many really great conversations that went beyond what we had the real estate to publish in our studies, frankly. So the podcast is a great way for us to share those stories more fully, and that's hopefully helping you all watching to gain more insights about AI implementation and hear from some really inspirational people. Podcasts are great. I've become a much more avid listener of them in the past 18 months or so during the times we live in. But they don't allow us to have more broad conversations with our audience. So today's event is meant to foster dialogue with our broader community, and we hope that you'll take advantage of this opportunity. Chat in any questions or comments that you have for our panelists, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as time permits. Our panelists have been patiently waiting to join this conversation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce each one. Kay Firth-Butterfield is the head of AI and machine learning at the World Economic Forum. Welcome, Kay.
Thank you.
Ya Xu is Vice President of Engineering at LinkedIn, where she leads the company's Women in Tech program. Ya, thank you for joining us as well.
Hello, glad to be here.
And Charlotte Degot is Managing Director and Partner at BCG GAMMA, Boston Consulting Group's AI business. She leads BCG GAMMA's sustainability and climate topic areas. Charlotte, it's great to have you with us.
Hello.
So let's kick off with a little table setting. In order to innovate with AI, I feel like we kind of need to understand it first. So as Kay said in her episode of Me, Myself, and AI, there's certainly some fear of AI in society right now, and you can't be friends with someone you're afraid of. So Kay, I'm wondering, can you share some ways you see leaders easing people's fears of AI?
Yes, surely. Thank you, Alison. I think that leaders need to be in government, business, academia, and non-profit, because we all need to come together to really help people to see that there isn't a Terminator lurking around the corner or an ex machina lurking around the corner, but there are some things that we have to solve with what we call AI today. You know, those are things that we are working on. And so fear of AI is not something that you need to particularly have, but we need to build that thing called trust. And I think different people are going about it in different ways. So the EU, for example, they're about to think about regulation on particularly the high risk areas. And I think we're going to see more regulation around the world coming. I know that there's something due from India, for example. I think that in academia, we need to be helping everybody, not just computer scientists, to understand AI, machine learning, because it's that understanding at grassroots that is going to help us build that trust. I think that also, obviously, you know, businesses that are doing a great job need to be talking about it more, because they are often doing a great job, but they're doing it under the covers because perhaps they're worried that if they talk about it, legal and compliance are going to be worried or whatever. But we do need to be talking about the good work that everybody's doing behind the scenes. And I think, a great example of that's the work that we've done with now Microsoft and IBM to really, in a multi-stakeholder group, sort of look at what their processes are around responsible AI, and then actually sort of talk about them in that multi-stakeholder group and publish those conversations so that other companies can say, well, this is how they do it. They've got a lot more money to put into responsible AI than we have, and they can learn from it so that we can build that trust on very many different levels.
That's so important. I think we hear continually these conversations about socializing, to your point, not just with technology teams, right? So getting business units to understand the value of what you're working on and to buy into it and to understand as much as is relevant to them about how the systems are working. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, you lead a team of over 300 data scientists at LinkedIn. So to Kay's point about scale, many of us can only imagine that kind of scale for AI projects. What constraints are you facing when you're trying to innovate? Are any of those fears that Kay talked about a component, or do you need to deliberately make space for innovation specifically? And if that's true, how do you do that?
So first of all, I don't think of these as constraints. Usually, if you think about the constraints, are really motivations, inspirations for innovation. If you think about what has really been driving the AI superpowers in the past 10 years, a lot of the development is coming from the initial limitations on hardware, and now because we have such a more powerful processing powers, that it's really then able to unlock a lot of those improvement or progress that we have noticed in the past several years. So to me, constraints are just motivation for us to be more innovative from that perspective. And Kay mentioned so LinkedIn, as part of Microsoft, we also are very much working hand in hand with the rest of Microsoft teams on this 4 responsible AI pillars. So we have certainly been spending a lot of energy, in particular in the area of fairness, explainability, and privacy. So I'm super excited to be able to share some of the work with the audience here today. But going back to your question of in terms of how can we make space for innovation, like I never, at least my experience, it was not like you kind of have a structured way of innovating. We have tried that as well. Like, for example, we have created Hack Day, and that we certainly solicited ideas, and then try to fund those ideas as sort of a incubation. Those work, but those don't work as well because this sort of scheduled innovation, like it really in my opinion, it doesn't work as well as if you just literally I would say my secret sauce is you just hire the best talent, you give them the hard problems, and then you incentivize them to you kind of stay out of the way, and you incentivize them to work on those hard problems in an innovative way. So I think that, to me, is probably the best way to make space for innovation.
That makes sense. And we deliberated back and forth in preparation for this panel about talking about how Google a few years ago had made that rule of 20% employee time would be protected for AI. And then it was kind of, or not for AI, I'm sorry, for innovation. And then that was kind of backed up or backtracked a bit. And then the question was kind of, well, what's the reaction there? And what is that saying about company culture? But I think it might depend organization to organization how much you need to formalize and make time. But culturally, I think what we're hearing a lot of it, as you're saying, is that the more organizations let these things happen organically or get an additional idea from something they're already thinking about, that really kind of drives it forward more than having specific dedicated time. I'm curious too, as we think about, the way we work is just so different now. That's not a question, I think, for anyone, but there's been deliberation now more in the media about, can collaboration happen remotely? Does it need to happen in person? Do the best ideas happen face to face? Yeah, what's your experience been with a shift to more of a remote first environment? Are you seeing any challenges to getting new ideas off the ground? Or are you finding that that's enabled thinking? Or how has that changed on your team in the past almost 2 years?
Maybe I'll start with there is a difference of like maybe in the future, well, not in the very near future, where we're actually going into a hybrid mode. I think it's going to be quite different from today. Today, most people are still remote, working from their home. So to the extent that like I'm a big fan of whiteboarding. Actually, as you can see, I literally bought a physical whiteboard in my home office where I can just whiteboard and working with people. So I definitely think that there needed to be a little bit more deliberation on hey, we gotta have to get time together. We kind of do virtual whiteboarding, that we brainstorm, and we gotta have to create that space where serendipitous ideas come up in the past. So I think that's sort of what like the mode right now. But once we get back to this hybrid mode, which that is, the LinkedIn policy is we trust people to work wherever they can do their best work. So the teams would then identify whatever mode works for them. They will come together and when they wanted to brainstorm, and then when they don't need to do brainstorm, they need to focus time, they can just work from home. So I think it's, in my from where I'm looking at it, like it would actually be even a better setup for innovation once we get into the hybrid mode.
Mm-hmm. Kay, we talked a little bit too about dynamics that might be changing as we experience this kind of return to work movement, as we're calling it. I mean, what do you see shifting?
Yeah, certainly. So I do think that sometimes you do need those one-on-one personal meetings that you can only have face to face. There is certainly room for that. But, our team has worked really well over the last 18 months, but we've worked at making it work well. And I think that that's something that's very important, that you have to still have your daily stand-ups. You have to, as you said, think about how you whiteboard using some of the tools that are available. And so I'm a great proponent of remote working, simply because I think it enables us to actually have the world as our talent base. We haven't got to think anymore about, can we get these people into America or into whichever country it is. We can actually employ them in place, and that is great for their own economy, and it's also great for the way that we think globally. And as an example, at the moment, I couldn't possibly have a member of my team from somewhere in Africa without the H-1B visa, but I could if we're continuing to remote work, and that might be the perfect person for the team. And also, I think that if we're thinking about what the geopolitical issues around AI, we know that there is a big difference between global north and global south. Well, maybe remote working can help us solve some of those challenges too.
Yeah, that's great. And it does lift some of the challenges we've had with workforce. It's sort of, what opportunities can we find from this situation? And that can sometimes be challenging to view in that way, but it's a helpful frame, I think, at times. So I'd like to talk a little bit to pivot a little bit and talk about how we operationalize innovation. So I think, we talk a lot, and our research focuses on this as well, about the ideal scenario for innovation maybe coming from human-machine collaboration and people and technology working together. I'm curious from both of you what unique challenges you think AI innovation projects specifically might introduce. Yeah, maybe we start with you.
Maybe this kind of goes back to the initial question. What's sort of the fear of what AI will bring? So I would say that as we introducing more automation, just kind of as we saw historically as well, there will be a shift on sort of the skills that is more naturally positioned for human and for people versus the ones that can be better taken care of by machines, by automation, by AI. But in general, I would say that, obviously those maybe more routine, boring, or dangerous work that currently are done by humans may down the road be handled by AI. But human are particularly valued or will be valued for their creativity, for their empathy, for their curiosity, right? If you think about, maybe I have a situation that is unpredictable, then the human is the best at making those decisions with a very unpredictable situations that you can't really train based on some of the historical data you're seeing, and be able to having that causal reasoning and making the right judgments. And things such as questions or answer questions that involves ethics, as another example, or just kind of non-routine physical work such as, hairstylist. I think, you need that level of creativity. And obviously, skills that involves managing people, interacting with others, and networking, and all these are aspects I think that humans are best positioned to do, and I don't see machines to be able to do that for us anytime soon at all, if not at all. Right, but I would wanted to really leave one quote, if I can remember it properly, by Richard Baldwin, which is a very famous economist, and then he used to have this saying that what machine really cannot do is to really identify and then clarify questions that the machines should work on. Right, so that ultimately needs to come from us. So I will leave it there. Back to you, Allison.
Thank you. Yeah, I had so many interesting thoughts cross my mind as you were talking. One was my hairstylist working side by side with a robot, and what would that feel like? Another was, you kind of preempted my next question of just thinking about your role at LinkedIn. You must have so much access to skill and capability data, and what specific skills, can't be automated or can be. And just thinking about how that landscape has shifted so much. I remember this was maybe 2012, 2013. Working with Andrew McAfee, and he said, from MIT, and he had said, one thing machines will never be able to do, and a skill you really need to develop, this was kind of a leadership development module we were working on, was you need to be able to write well, like put your thoughts together well and be persuasive. And we've seen with natural language processing and sometimes what we see is kind of laughable, right? Some of these sort of, write-ups that AI can do, and you laugh because it just is so illogical and no one would ever write in this way. But we've seen how well AI can mimic humans with, in kind of emotional activities, which I would consider writing one of those. So just kind of sparked a lot of thinking about what makes the most sense to have automated, and where does that decisioning come in? If a manager is having a more of an emotional conversation, a feedback conversation with an employee, that should be done on a human to human level, but is there a way for technology to layer in some kind of assessment or something? And do we want that? We're seeing more and more of that, I think, in the performance management space, and just in terms of routine reminders and nudges and saying, you should have this conversation with this person. Oh, reminder to talk in this meeting about this. And to what degree is that invasive and inhuman? I think they're just conversations and questions we'll continue to wrestle with. But Kay, I'd love to get your take on any specific skills or capabilities you're seeing that people are kind of maybe happily relinquishing to technology and not fearing, oh, the machine's taking this from me. This is actually a good thing to offload so I can free myself for more creative thinking at the same time.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm seeing very much of that at the moment. I think that we will see it more in the next 10 years or so. But certainly we're doing some preparation for that. So thinking, for example, around how some care for older people could be given by autonomous AI, either as robots or just in your iPad, and really thinking about, what do older people need in those interactions so that we can give care, because we know that it's really hard to find carers. Having looked after my elderly mother, I know how difficult that is and how great it would have been to have something that helped. But, at what cost to the older person's privacy, for example. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes right through from older people through to business. How do we use these tools in business? And also to how do we use these tools with young people? We know that we can educate well. We're using AI. But again, these are a vulnerable set of people, young people and older people. How do we make sure that human-machine interaction works really well for the human being? So really thinking about human-centered design here.
Can I jump in?
Please do.
Please. Okay, so actually more of a response to Allison's point earlier. We talk about how maybe AI can never be as good of a writer as human. I do wanted to say that, especially with in the last few years with the advancements in large language models, in such a short time, we see what GPT-3 is able to do. We saw sort of so many big models that is coming out, and then what they can do in terms of, sure, they are not as good of a writer as human, but the way that they are able to do natural language and generation, it's amazing. This is actually an area that I would say that I would probably disagree with and Andrew McAfee, is that the professor's name? Maybe I would actually say that's one area I would think that machine can do as well as human down the road. I'm hopeful.
I know, that's what's so shocking to me is kind of, it was completely, I was nodding vigorously as he was talking, saying, I completely resonate with this. And it protected, a lot of my role, had writing involved. I said, yes, okay, I'm safe, and to see the changes that have happened. And it's really staggering to me. Charlotte, I did want to give you a chance to describe a little bit of the innovation work that you particularly are leading and spearheading at BCG GAMMA. There's a recent product innovation. It's called BCG CO2 AI, and it's focused on helping corporations track and optimize CO2 emissions. So we're kind of shifting a little bit into how does innovation not just benefit the individual, as Kay, you were talking about, but the kind of the world at large. And as we talk about climate, I'm hopeful you can explain a little bit about how you're using AI to help you in the project and kind of what you see it meaning for the future.
Yes, Allison. So indeed, innovation at BCG GAMMA is extremely important to continue help our clients on their major problems that are constantly evolving. And one of the key innovation we are launching this year is around sustainability and climate, realizing that it's becoming, fortunately, now one of the biggest priorities of our corporate clients, and that they are really struggling, in fact, to move to actions on their climate journey. We see many companies making very strong strategic statements about being net zero in a couple of years or reducing drastically their emissions. But when we look factually at where they stand in terms of reduction, what we see is that it's extremely difficult for them to move to action. And the reason is it's extremely difficult to know where to act, because gaining transparency on CO2 emissions, for example, is a nightmare for large corporations. It's tons of data spread everywhere, including outside the direct scope of activity, like supplier emissions that you need to gather data directly from the suppliers potentially, but they don't know neither how to calculate their emissions. So all this is a nightmare. And this is exactly where innovation and artificial intelligence can really help, because it's the perfect playground, in fact, for artificial intelligence, helping to gather data, process data from very different sources, structure them, work by modeling to estimate the missing information, and then simulate things, recommend decisions, and even do some optimizations. So this is where that's just an example of what we do with CO2 AI, which is our product that we for which we identify the needs progressively by talking to our clients, etc., and that we've decided to invest a lot on because we realized that that was a major innovation indeed that could have a major impact for our for corporations, especially the large ones that have so much to do when it comes to climate and managing their impact, and at the same time so many difficulties to actually move to action.
Yeah, we've seen such a push for, like, to your point, a lot of talking about this, but how can we take action? So it's great to see an organization doing something in this space. I'm curious, could you talk about any challenges that you might have encountered when you were getting this project off the ground? Or was there anything really difficult about just getting this started, whether it was buy-in or operationalizing a certain element or anything along those lines?
I think so there are you could think about two types of challenges. Internal challenges about getting the organization invest time and money on this kind of innovative products for which we don't know at the beginning whether it's going to work, whether it's going to bring value for our clients or not. And then there are external challenges about how to make this real at large corporations when it's a brand new product, and that in some way you're asking also a corporation to trust you about the potential impact this kind of project can have. Actually, I would say on the internal challenges, it was in fact pretty easy because BCG GAMMA has really a culture of being at the forefront, innovating, researching, making sure that our data scientists, etc., are really always pushing the boundaries of what AI can do and really trying to bring the next level of impact to our clients. So on the internal side of things, it was pretty easy thanks to the culture we have in place. And on the external side of things, it's always a matter of finding the right partners at the beginning that are extremely concerned by the topic, extremely aware of the difficulties because they have already tried for many years. Often we are talking about sustainability pioneers, right? Companies, in the case of CO2 AI, that have been trying to manage their climate impact for years and that really see the difficulty. And so they need to identify and really clearly see the value, the potential value, because they have suffered from the problem for many years. And they need to be a bit in the same culture of innovation and trying things. And so all the game is to find the right partners at the beginning to try through prototype modes, proof of concepts, etc., to be able to really check that the value is materializing in a concrete way.
I wonder too, you mentioned, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in on that and say I sort of feel Charlotte's pain on this, because obviously, we have a lot of members who are also wanting to reach net zero, and how do you go about that? And just thinking about energy, we just published a paper about how AI might help when you're thinking about energy use, and also going back to that, different people in the world have different needs of AI. And we have, as many people will know, now 11 network centers around the world. And so, our Turkish center, for example, it wants to take on thinking about industrial waste. And industrial waste is 94% of all waste that we produce. And so, if we can even make a small percentage difference there, it will be actually a big difference.
Absolutely, and that's such an aspirational goal that I hope we can attain. It feels really positive to be talking along those lines. I want to jump back a little bit. We were starting to get into this direction, I think, naturally, about data quality and biases. And it feels impossible to me to talk about AI in any conversation today without having that conversation about bias. Kay, on Me, Myself, and AI, you mentioned a Gartner study. It said that by 2022, which is right around the corner, if we don't deal with bias, 85% of algorithms will become erroneous because of them. So I'm wondering your initial thoughts on how we might start to correct that issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, we have to recognize the problem. And whilst Charlotte and GR both recognize the problem, there are many, many companies now that are early in their AI journey and perhaps don't recognize the problem. So that's the first thing. I think that I think it was Brad Smith who said, we've had years as humans to tackle this ethics issue, and we're still not doing it very well. But now we've got to tackle it in computer science. And so first of all is that recognition. I think second is to look for tools that will begin to help you. And we've been doing some work on this. We're just about, for example, to publish some workbook on thinking about how you use AI in talent acquisition. That's an area that the EU has said is high risk. And if you can just take that and then use it to really think through and drill down into how you think about bias and diversity. And then I think there's organizational change. We all need in our organization to be aware of this. And some organizations are, again, doing much better than others. And then there's the thinking about diverse teams. So when you're actually creating the algorithms, you need to have diverse teams. And by diverse teams, I don't just mean gender or race. I also mean pairing up those computer scientists with those humanity graduates so that you actually get a good cross-section of what the world that you're going to be serving looks like.
That's such a great way to frame it, that it's about kind of mirroring your audience or your consumer base or who your constituents are. And thank you for teeing up my next question for Ya so perfectly, which was, I kind of wanted to ask, given your role at LinkedIn and thinking more broadly about LinkedIn as a platform that's essentially designed to help professionals network into new roles and opportunities, how does LinkedIn think about that bias issue in data, specifically as it pertains to recruiting and attracting talent?
So I was got a +1 for everything that Kay has just said with regarding like what's important, the right recognition of the problem, the right tooling, the awareness, and having a diverse workforce that is able to represent the audience, the consumer of your product. Just on top of that, I mean, like certainly LinkedIn, we are working on all these aspects that Kay has mentioned. I just wanted to mention. One thing that's really important to internalize is also that bias or fairness is not just limited to algorithms, right? It's when we're thinking about a very user member centric view, it's this overall experience that they have that needed to be fair, regardless whether it's coming from or it's introduced by algorithms or it's something that is like maybe the wording, the copies that's used on the platform. So I can be a little bit more concrete with regarding how we are addressing, tackling this problem at LinkedIn. The way that we are thinking about it is really these 3 components from number 1, assess and audit what's on our platform. And second is to mitigate. And the third one is really just continuously monitoring. And so I can go a little bit deeper for the technical audience here. For example, in the assessment phase, we do very heavily, obviously, evaluating, and is the training data representative? Is the model performing equally well? In terms of AUC, precision recall for different segments of our members. When the algorithm is predicting that maybe this male cohort and female cohort each have similar scores in terms of ranking scores, is the outcome or what the likelihood, let's say for example the invitation is the likelihood of people accepting invitation in both of the cohorts also similar, right? So that's what we call outcome test as well. So a lot of effort goes on in that sort of assessing, making sure that there is no unintentional consequence or like bias that we have on the platform. And then going to mitigation and algorithm mitigation in particular, we also have obviously during the pre-training phase that you can think about how you can sample the data in a way that is representative. During the training phase, you can use a lot of the techniques such as maybe residual training or some of the really good work that is done from Microsoft, as an example. They open source this their Fair Learn toolkit as well. And then certainly when you have the model trained, you can also think about how you can re-rank the scores such as that you can be more fair with regarding to some of the fairness evaluation criteria that you have. And then in the continuous monitoring, which is actually a really critical phase as well, because because how dynamic our product is, and we constantly are trying to evolve and building new features and bring new features, providing additional value to our members and customers. We wanted to make sure as we are iterating and evolving, we are not introducing any unintended consequences, right? So we introduce this thing called essentially fairness aware and experimentation, where every product feature launch goes through that, so that we're making sure that we are monitoring and measuring those fairness metrics as well as we're shipping things into production. But obviously it's we are still in the early phase, like I think Kay have mentioned earlier, which is we are still learning, we are still evolving, and so and certainly have shared a lot of the work that we've done to the public regarding the papers that we published or some of the open source toolkit that I have shared as well.
Great. Yeah, I think a baseline sort of place to start with this is to be thinking about it and having these conversations like we're doing. And again, I feel like we can't talk about technology, AI, without these conversations, right? About how are we more ethical around this? How are we thinking about anticipating potential future problems? Charlotte, is there anything you would add to this topic?
Maybe I mean what was said is perfectly right. Maybe just to add one figure which I find pretty interesting to realize the magnitude of the issue is a figure which comes from our annual survey on responsible AI, which says that 62% of corporations at the moment have not put in place the mandatory processes to incorporate all these bias reduction metrics and all these principles around responsible AI in the development of their AI system. So, I mean, that just says to me the magnitude of the importance of the issue and how fast and how much we need altogether to make this a lot more incorporated in the corporations' processes around AI.
Absolutely. Lots of work to be done, right? But that's the case with any discipline where there's growth and excitement, I think. So before we do have some great audience questions, I want to allow some time to turn to those and ask as many as we can. Before we open that up, though, I did want to ask each of you just what kind of future you see in AI. What dreams do you have about the future? We called this event, the Innovator's Mindset, nod to Clay Christensen, but designing a better tomorrow with AI. So how do you see AI contributing to that better tomorrow? Okay, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I want to take it back to that quote of Brad Smith's. We haven't yet solved the ethics issue, but actually, with this AI, responsible AI movement, we are actually having to face it as a society. And so what I actually hope is that AI will actually help us as a society to think more about diversity, to think more about inclusion, and actually that, the work that we are doing will actually help have that knock-on effect to society to make it a kinder and more caring place, because we're doing this great work, or at least Charlotte and Giara and many people are doing so, even if 62% of people haven't thought about it. And I think, I think that's an interesting statistic, because I think what Charlotte said is that 62% of people who actually have computer scientists working on this. Excuse the dog. But also, there are lots of companies who are buying AI. And if they're not thinking about it, then, that's actually increasing that number as well.
Absolutely. But I love the point of how can AI make us more human and be better humans to each other? That's a really positive way to think about advancements and innovation. Charlotte, what about you? What are your dreams for the future of AI?
I would say I have two. Working in the corporate world, I think we're just at the beginning of the journey of embedding AI at scale in all major processes of corporations, and really helping them derive massive impact from it. So that would be the first one. And the second one, which is really, really key for me, is I work mainly in sustainability and climate, and using AI now to really help on reducing our climate impact and anticipating potential also consequences of climate. And I think this is a major field where AI can really, really, really help. It is so complex. It's such a system that we need to tackle when we talk about this kind of issues. And for me, getting the help of AI is key. And there are a lot of applications. It's already there, it's already happening, it's already showing massive impact. And this is making me, I'm not saying it will save us, and I'm not over optimistic neither, but I think we have these means in front of us that can help us on those critical issues, and that would be really a pity that we don't leverage them at the maximum we can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. How can we scale our learnings and the positive impact, right? Yeah. What are your dreams for a better tomorrow coming from AI?
Well, I share very similar sentiment. I think Charlotte mentioned how AI is going to make, helping assist the climate change and all these things that it's important for us to tackle. Kay mentioned that AI is going to help us being a, better human being. I definitely have high conviction that AI will be able to assist in every aspects of our life. But to get there, there's definitely a lot need to come together. Technology advancements has maybe been leading the way, but what are the social norms that we need to consider of incorporating AI into our life, and laws and regulations that were mentioned about the EU AI regulation proposal, and many other will follow through as well. So really there is a lot to do to get there, but I am a big fan, obviously, of how AI can really be making our life better tomorrow.
Yeah, me too. All right, audience questions. I know we don't have a lot of time. Let's take a few minutes and answer some of these if we can. So we had a couple of folks send some questions early, and I do want to reward them for having that initiative by asking a couple of these questions. Ted, who's coming to us from Jabra, asked, so basically a very challenging aspect of AI innovation and development is around the collection and maintenance of data. We've talked a lot about bias, but also regulations and other constraints. And he's curious how we could go about perhaps democratizing access to high quality data sets in a way that's safe for contributors and also useful for AI research as well as commercialization. And I wonder, Kay, given where you're sitting, any thoughts you have on democratizing access to available data, how we might start that process?
Yes, well, of course, I'm going to start by saying we've got a project on this, but it is in the early stages, and we're still very much welcoming that multi-stakeholder group into it. So, if you're interested, then drop me a line. But I actually wanted to talk about some work that Rwanda is doing, because I always keep saying Global South, not as well represented as Global North. And I was just talking to our center there yesterday, and they are keen to release a lot of data in the healthcare space, so that they can really innovate in the healthcare space. So, it's there are lots of people thinking about this around the world. What, of course, I would always say is we need to think about it globally. But it's an interesting problem. But I think, good things happening to try to solve it.
Good. Timely question. Mike asks us.
Can I add something to that? I think there's also, as you see, there's also just a lot more organizations that are starting to share their data, the data that they use for training as well. Like the recent news on, I think this company called Leang that is releasing like 400 million of all the data that they use, that essentially allow everybody to just use and download. But I think one from technology standpoint is really important. Like, for example, at LinkedIn, we have a lot of data on insights that we can share on labor markets in particular. And the approach that we have been doing is that we have been able to share some of the data to the public, to the government and agencies, for them to think about how they should be creating their workforce going forward. However, we had to be very careful, as we wanted to make sure that we're protecting the privacy of the members. So we do apply techniques such as differential privacy to make sure that when we are sharing the data, we still the privacy are well protected.
Got it. Yeah, sorry, I was jumping to I want to squeeze in 2 questions more if we can before we move to the end of our hour. And we have an exciting piece to share with folks who can stay on and watch at the end. So stay tuned for something for that. Had a question come in from Mike Unzuta. He was asking about how small or medium enterprise businesses, so imagine 50 to 100 employees, might leverage AI. And I know that might be a little bit of a small scope for many of us, but I'm curious even to frame this question as, how does one get started? So you probably don't have the infrastructure that a BCG might have, or access to the networks that LinkedIn or the World Economic Forum has. What are some initial steps you might take, and where might you want to focus your energies if you're thinking about getting started? Charlotte, maybe you could take that.
Yes. The first thing for me would be really to have this impact lens when any business, in fact, assess an AI opportunity and want to start leveraging AI. Where is it that AI in your organization can deliver the most value in the quickest way? And that's really, for me, important to spot the big use cases, and start with 1 or 2, not more. Do not try to implement like a lot of small trials everywhere, but really have this thinking about where is it that I want to derive impact. And the second thing is, once you've identified where you want to use AI, I think it's in fact pretty easy now. I feel there are many ways of getting either off the shelf or almost off the shelf AI tools that can help SMEs. I know for example, I've looked a lot at restaurants and the food retail business, and even small restaurants, they can access very interesting propositions leveraging AI to help on the demand forecast, making sure that stock are optimized, that food is ordered at the right moment, etc. So, I mean, a lot of opportunities, and the key thing for me is really to make sure to focus the efforts on the right buckets of value that are really going to make a difference in terms of top line or margin fast, to pay back the effort and to fund the journey for more.
I wanted to maybe add one more thing, which is I actually think that nowadays, it's actually much easier for small businesses to actually leverage AI. Obviously, with the cloud, where you have all these computing resources, much easier accessible. There's a lot of tools that the companies have open sourced and has built, a community has built. And on top of it, one trend with AI is also that there's just a lot of these large models that become almost the platforms for other companies to build on top of, like the large language models that you can do a few shots training on top of it to sort of just fine tune for your specific use cases. But it's trained on billions and gazillions, I don't even know the right word for this, of data that you can leverage and build your business on top.
Right. Kay was mentioning some tools earlier, right, that they've been working on together with IBM, Microsoft, that there are so many available tools. And to Charlotte's point, off-the-shelf solutions might be a way to get started. I want to quickly just give a note to a lot of the questions that were coming in were really centered around and granted, they came through the duration of the hour, so as we were just getting into the meat of our discussion, but around this fear of automation and AI replacing us. And I mean, this is, I guess, a conversation that's not going away. And I feel like maybe I'm just privileged to talk to so many leaders like you all and others who give us really concrete examples of when AI is implemented or it's a part of a project or a process, it doesn't mean it's rendered an employee or a contributor obsolete. It's given them an opportunity to do something different. And whether that's kind of self-directed or they've worked with a manager and they've given them more of a direction in a different angle. And, to plug me, myself, and AI briefly, I would say that great conversations with folks like Dave Johnson from Moderna, who talked about this, using AI to develop a vaccine for COVID-19. And what did that automation allow the team to think about instead? And culturally, so many organizations have talked about this, beyond yours, about people not feeling replaced or scared. But I guess if anyone has any kind of final closing thought on that, about how to coach people who are concerned that their teammates or their people supporting them might feel that new technology is a disruptor in a negative way and could negatively impact their value to an organization. I mean, how do you start to frame that conversation so they see the opportunity versus the threat?
Well, I would say that one thing that we know we can do with AI is actually match people who perhaps have not got the job, that their job is going to be automated, but they may well have skills and one skill that they need to learn. And AI is really good at helping us say, okay, we can move this person to this job that they will probably enjoy more, and we can do that with a little bit of training. So it's not that you're going to lose your job, it's that you're going to perhaps be doing something different that actually you might enjoy a lot more.
So plus 100 to what Kay said. I have no more to add. I just wanted to say that we actually literally build that career pathway tool that we have opened it to everyone to use, that you can see, hey, what are the skills that I need to gain from my current job to the adjacent jobs that is happening in the industry. So
great. Definitely a resource to check out, and for people to just think about, what am I interested in exploring? What else could I do? Or if I only didn't have to run this report, how could I spend this time? And think about, there's a lot of rote things that AI can automate. It doesn't have to be solving the climate crisis as the first thing you tackle, right? I mean, that's a great thing to tackle, but it doesn't have to be the top. Kay, Charlotte, I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. Really great conversation. I feel like these conversations are only getting us started on these topics. So I do encourage folks to reach out, to continue the dialogue over in our LinkedIn community, AI for Leaders, and just continue talking with us, asking your questions. Hopefully we're providing insight that's useful. I do have a quick little video to share with the audience. Wanted to let you all know that Me, Myself, and AI Season 3 is going to be premiering October 19th. So we have a trailer to take a look at. I'd encourage you to stick around and watch, and get out your phone. There's a QR code at the end so you can have quick access to jump over and take a look at the show. But other than that, I think you've you've listened to me talk long enough, certainly anyway. I appreciate everyone's time today and for joining us, and thank you, and hope to see you at the next event. So have a great rest of your day, everyone, and enjoy the trailer to come.
Thank you.
Me, Myself, and AI is a podcast on artificial intelligence and business produced by MIT Sloan Management Review and Boston Consulting Group. In Season 3, we're sharing more stories from technology leaders across the globe.
This season, we're talking with executives from companies including NASDAQ, ExxonMobil, Salesforce, and IKEA.
Our podcast focuses on thoughtful approaches to AI. The stories and use cases we share are always relatable and applicable, no matter what your industry is.
And we learn about our guests as well, how they chose this career and what excites them to go to work every day.
My role really, I think, day to day is working with our business partners to find opportunities for AI.
Responsible AI is a personal passion of mine, and we're talking about a scale that is truly unimaginable.
We have our biases, we're colored by them in ways we don't realize. Having a tool that can free us from those, I think it's a no-brainer that we should be embracing them.
I'm Sam Ransbotham, Professor of Information Systems at Boston College and guest editor at MIT Sloan Management Review.
And I'm Shervin Kodabande, Senior Partner and Co-Leader of BCG's AI practice in North America. Me, Myself, and AI Season 3 premieres October 19. Stream it wherever you listen to podcasts and let these stories inspire your own work.